Tulsa head coach Tre Lamb says the quiet part out loud. Both of these teams are still struggling to find an identity, which is 100% accurate. So identify something, one thing, anything to be good at it. And by God, pin your ears back and just go be good at it Friday.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by GameTime Tickets. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Get with the best in the ticketing industry, which is GameTime today. Meanwhile, we get to slide into this conversation of Oklahoma State versus Tulsa. Yes, their head coach, Tre Lamb, has had a lot of glowing things to say about Mike Gundy. Historically speaking, when you look back at Oklahoma State over the last 20 years, winning 8, 9, 10 games is what Mike Gundy has been known for, and he puts them up there right next with somebody like a Bill Snyder as the most underrated coaches in college football history. I think that there's definitely some validity there because you have 18 years worth of success. But in those 18 years worth of success, Oklahoma State always had an identity. Typically, it was an offensive-led identity as a team that could score 40, 50, 60, and defensively may give up an equal amount, but if they had the ball last, they were going to be able to score. We were known as a team that could get up and down the field in a matter of seconds. So if you had a lead on Oklahoma State for about a decade, it wasn't safe because the Cowboys could drive all the way up and down the field in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds. We saw it happen all the time with guys like Justin Blackmon and James Washington and Mason Rudolph and Justice Hill and Chris Carson and Tyreek Hill. That was the identity of Oklahoma State for so long. And then Jim Knowles showed up. And then magically, 2021, Oklahoma State has a top 3 national defense in several categories: total defense, sacks, tackles for loss, you name it. Oklahoma State was top 3 to top 5 in almost every single metric that season. And that kind of flipped the script. Then it felt like Oklahoma State was now going to get to a position as a team that was always capable offensively, and now we had a top-notch defense. So there was an identity. We leaned so much on the identity in 2021 that we completely abandoned the offensive philosophies that got us there. And so everything was on Jim Knowles' 2021 defense. So it doesn't seem like there's been a marriage of, positives on both sides of the ball. We're not likely to get a bunch of marriages on both sides of the ball this season. So what is our identity? Tulsa's obviously struggling to find one as well. In his press conference, he mentioned how they're trying to identify their 3 best running plays and the 3 best passing plays and their 3 best blitz packages and simplification based off of the few things they're good at all across the board. Mike Gundy is likely doing something comparable. He has mentioned simplifying everything for this particular ball game. But it's another game that's kind of on a short week, which should be able to benefit us. But we had a long week going into Oregon, and that didn't really work so well. And that was the struggle, I think you could say, against Oregon, even to some degree against UT Martin. What are we? When we talk about Oklahoma State's identity forever being an offensive team that could put up 60, that could score in 2 seconds, that didn't have defense, then we had defense, so we leaned wholeheartedly on that in 2021. Since then, it's like we're grasping for things. 2023, when we played Texas for the Big 12 title, our identity was Ollie Gordon. Our identity was a team that was going to be able to rush the ball, and we were going to put up 150 whether you liked it or not, no matter what you did. That was the identity of that team. We don't have an identity of this team. I was hoping that going into the Oregon game, we knew we weren't going to be collectively as fast. We knew we weren't collectively going to have as much depth. We knew collectively we weren't going to have as much athleticism. But I thought that a big body beast brand of the Big 12 in the middle of Oklahoma would be willing to go start a fist fight in a phone booth against the Ducks. That didn't work either. So we got outclassed in every capacity against Oregon. That cannot happen against Tulsa. And while Tulsa is identifying, some of the things that they can excel at, that's going to put us in a precarious position. If we allow Tulsa to figure out their identity before Oklahoma State, we could be talking about this equals a loss. I don't think that it will. I don't think that it could. I don't think that it even should be in the realm of possibilities that we lose to Tulsa. but they're going to come for this game. Again, they've discussed publicly how they can be the next Oklahoma State. Are we going to give them that credence in this ball game? If we don't find an identity first, if we can't be more physical first, then that is a fear that we all have to realize. So let me know down in the comment section for all you fine folks out here on YouTube. What do you want our identity to be? For me, I would like it to be physicality. That's what I wanted our identity to be against Oregon, and we didn't show up and do it. So what is the identity of this team? Well, if you go back and see what Tulsa's been giving up within their front seven defensively, the identity of this team should be much like the identity of the Ollie Gordon squads. We're going to run it down your throat repeatedly until you can stop it. And as we said yesterday, that sets us up for the Baylor game as well. Because if you can run for 5.7, 6.7 yards a carry against Tulsa, are you going to get the same amount against Baylor? Probably not. But should it be comparable? Absolutely. Because Baylor's front seven seems to have the same ability to stop the run as Tulsa's front seven. Surely, Tulsa's going to work this week on shoring that up, but they don't know what our identity is going to be. I mean, we haven't shown the ability yet to be able to air the ball out. We haven't shown the ability yet to be able to run consistently. We haven't shown that we're going to utilize our tight ends. We haven't shown that we're going to utilize tempo. We haven't shown that we're going to get creative with packages. We haven't shown that we're going to utilize different iterations of the slot receivers and the tight ends. We haven't shown anything. So while Tre Lamb is saying that his team is struggling to find an identity as well, it's probably more problematic for us because they've had an extra game for starters. Secondarily, we came into the season not knowing what we were going to be. It seemed as though during fall and spring camp, there was an emphasis on tempo. Now, naturally, the downside to tempo is you put your team on the field with a bunch of 3-and-outs, but we're not even utilizing the tempo aspect. So we don't have an identity as a tempo team. We don't have an identity as a passing team or a running team or a defensive team or a blitzing team. We don't have an identity yet. And even if we're not going to be very good this season, we still need to have an identity. At least last year, you knew we were going to be able to hand the ball off to Ollie Gordon and Nick Martin, Colin Oliver. We're going to be able to do some crazy things defensively to at least keep us in some moments. So while we struggled with an identity last season, we still had more of one than this season. Like you knew last year, if you put 19 people in the box, we were still going to probably give the ball to Ollie Gordon. That was an offensive identity. Defensively, you could do whatever you wanted, but if Nick Martin or Colin Oliver got you, it was going to be a problematic day for you. That was an identity that we carried last season. Maybe it wasn't much of one, but we need to find an identity this week. Maybe it's that we're just going to hand the rock off 45 times and we're going to make the other team beat us. That would be great. Or maybe we're going to air it out. Maybe we are going to take the top off the defense over and over and over. That would be a good identity. Defensively, we know how aggressive Todd Grantham traditionally is. So is that going to be our identity? Are we going to be a team that blitzes from crazy angles consistently, constantly? We don't have an identity yet. Are we going to be a cover team? Are we going to be a man-to-man team? Are we going to be a team that mixes it up? Like, we don't know yet. But whatever it is, just decide. Like, okay, for this game, we're going to be a rushing attack, right? For this game, we're going to be a coverage defense. For this game, we're going to be a blitzing defense. Identify some of the things that we could potentially be good at it and get it done in this game. Because you're not going to have very many games throughout the course of the season where you can tinker around and toy with stuff and move guys and shift guys and make the most amount of sense. This is the get-right game. And if the Cowboys don't get right in this game, it could be a struggle. But thankfully, if we do find some semblance of an identity in this game, it should carry us through to the Baylor. The Baylor game and the Tulsa game could look very comparable. But it's going to be up to us to show what our identity is going to be, at least coming out of this game into the Baylor game. Bring it. We need to see something. Just like you need to see your bank account capabilities go up, this episode is brought to you potentially, partially by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off for you. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means you actually get to cash in off of your decision. With football back in action, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. You just pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player projections. You can then turn your takes into real prizes in less than 60 seconds. If you love playing PrizePicks, it's going to get even better with Locked On this season. It's quick. It's easy. Honestly, it's the best way to play along daily fantasy football. You're going to love checking the projections, even if it's Josh Allen more or less than 270 yards, or Saquon Barkley more or less than 1 rushing TD. Make sure that you go download PrizePicks today, the PrizePicks app, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 play. Get with PrizePicks because it's nice to be right. It feels good to be right. And you can be right with PrizePicks. So we just talked a little bit about the identification. If we don't find an identity in this game, it could be a death-defying act for the remainder of the season. Another massively important piece of this game that we alluded to a little bit to some degree yesterday, but that is the fact that we don't get Bedlam. So this is kind of the in-state rivalry. You all know that Tulsa is going to view this at a higher level than Oklahoma State just because of our success over them and the size of the school, so on and so forth. But, theoretically, John Gaines did decide to go to Tulsa over Oklahoma State, OU, and other places in the offseason. Yeah, we did get Trey McLaughlin. We did get Katie Batman Jones. We got Taj Overton. We got Carter Langendorfer. But are we going to be able to maintain all of those guys? Aiden Martin from Berryhill. If we lose this ball game, this is one of those things. It's a darned if you do, darned if you don't style of equation, because if you beat Tulsa, then everywhere in recruiting and everyone is going to say, well, yeah, of course you beat Tulsa. Duh. So it doesn't necessarily carry a lot of cachet if you do win the game against Tulsa, the team you're supposed to beat, even if you have a depleted roster, even if you have a new staff, even if you have all new transfers. You can line up different scenarios, and none of them equal Oklahoma State getting beat by Tulsa. So it would be disastrous for not only Oklahoma State. Obviously, that would mean that Mike Gundy is probably facing a more precarious situation throughout the course of the season if he were to drop a game to Tulsa. But even worse would be the recruiting. OU is not having any success at the moment recruiting the state of Oklahoma. Now, you could make an argument as to why. Right, some of these individuals, they just assumed we're going to commit to them because of the name and them being in the SEC. Some of them had legacy family ties where they just assumed they were going to become Sooners because of some family legacies and things of that nature. You could even push out what some Sooner fans are out here saying, and that is that, well, we don't want any of the kids in Oklahoma because none of them are good enough to play for OU. You could go with that route as well, because we have seen that pushed out, not only online, but in this comment section of this show. You see people like, yeah, we didn't want those guys and they weren't good enough, or whatever the case may be. That may be the justification for OU fans on why they can't beat Oklahoma State this year in in-state recruiting, but it will mean nothing if we lose to Tulsa. This is one of those games that they could be playing for tons of stuff. Instead of just having Deshaun Gaines decide that he's going to go to Tulsa over Oklahoma State, but then they might have a little bit of viability getting into the living rooms of the Trey McLaughlins, of the Aiden Martins, or the Katie Batman Jones, or the Taj Overtons of the world. At the end of the day, Oklahoma State's cachet and being in the Big 12 and having the ability to be more competitive in NIL, all of that does carry a significant amount of weight. But just like you're seeing with Oklahoma State over OU in recruiting, OU has more money. They're in the SEC. They have a lot of things going for them. But currently, the in-state guys don't really care about all that. They're more worried about what is building at Oklahoma State and what the potential could be if you get Oklahoma State back where they used to be and constantly in contention for a CFP playoff spot. So Oklahoma State beating Tulsa, it's not going to go a long way. Like, there's no way that you can go to recruits and say, hey, we lost Oregon, but we did beat Tulsa. That's not going to carry any weight. But if you lose to Tulsa, that's probably the kiss of death. That's the final nail in the Mike Gundy coffin. And I think you can make the argument that if Oklahoma State does lose to Tulsa, that it could potentially expedite the process for Mike Gundy being the head man on the sidelines. What's best for everybody, Mike Gundy included, is if Oklahoma State makes this big run, right? Wins 6, 7, 8 in a row and puts ourselves at least in contention for a Big 12 playoff spot or Big 12, you know what I'm talking about. Playoff implications are obviously there if you're going to play for a Big 12 title. Thank you. That's where we were going. But it could be catastrophic if you lose this game, because convincing people to come to Oklahoma State over Tulsa whenever you're constantly beating them, it doesn't mean much. It doesn't do anything. But if you lose to Tulsa, you are stoking flames that would get so far out of control. Then I think that you're not only talking about a mass exodus from this, particular roster we have now, but you're also talking about losing those recruits, the in-state guys. This is the best we have ever done with in-state recruiting by 13,000 country miles. It's not even close. This is the best Oklahoma class Oklahoma State has ever put together. To watch it fall apart would be crazy. But I think that if you entertain a loss to Tulsa, that's what it would be. Now, I don't want to pretend that Tulsa's viewing this as their Super Bowl, but if I'm their athletic director or the president or their coach, and I've been telling recruits that, hey, we're going to get there, we're going to be in Oklahoma State someday, and then you go beat Oklahoma State, your sales pitch just got significantly better. And we would become bitter. That is for sure. So, yeah. Does it mean a whole lot if we win? No. Is there going to be any recruit in the country that's like, I'm going to go to Oklahoma State since I beat Tulsa? No. But the other side of that coin could be dramatic, because there is a discrepancy nowadays in recruiting. Your Power 4 D1s, they're taking less high school dudes and more transfers. So that would be yet another thing that Tulsa could sales pitch to these recruits. Like, hey, you might have an Oklahoma State offer, you might have an OU offer, but here's what we have cooking, and here's what our NIL does, and here's our plans for the future. This is why finding an identity in this game is somewhat important for both teams, but even more so for Oklahoma State. You cannot allow Tulsa to dictate this game, because it may not even take a loss. If we beat Tulsa in overtime, that's still pretty much a loss, right? That's the way it would be perceived in the state of Oklahoma. So if you're an Oklahoma recruit, right now there is a justification still yet for you deciding to rock with Oklahoma State as opposed to going to the team we do not speak of 71 miles south of Stillwater. But if you lose to Tulsa, that makes it really difficult to maintain this recruiting class. I think you could make the argument at the end of the year that our record's going to indicate how many players off of this roster need to go or stay. Okay, you could make that argument. But there is no argument to saying that it's okay that we lost Taj Overton or Katie Batman Jones or Brian McLaughlin or Trey McLaughlin or Aiden Martin or Carter Langendorfer. There is no justification. And that's precisely what this game would be like. So if anybody ever says, a trap game, don't say that it's ridiculous, because this is almost the definition of a trap game. A trap game is a game that you're supposed to win, but it has tons of massive ramifications if you do not win. Like, not only are we surely paying Tulsa to make this trip, I mean, you saw that the other day. Somebody paid $1.2 million to lose, or $900,000 to lose. You want to avoid that for starters. But secondarily, there's no bragging rights if you say you beat Tulsa. But the other side of that equation is beyond disastrous for Oklahoma State. And it would probably torpedo this recruiting class that we currently have. Right now, the roster's still checked in. They're engaged. They're ready to rally together and make something happen because they've only lost one ball game. But that could change. If you lose to Tulsa, or you even have an overtime game with Tulsa, the roster conversation changes, in my opinion, fairly dramatically, unfortunately, instantaneously. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to get tickets because college football is back. And you can't be more excited if you have Game Time at your disposal, right? The tailgates, the pageantry, the rivalries, the energy. There's nothing like it. That's what college football gives us. But let's be honest, sometimes getting tickets can be more difficult than the performance your team's putting out on the field, right? Whether it's endless amounts of waiting or hidden fees or prices jumping at checkout, you don't get the craziness with Game Time. This is the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Whenever you pull up Game Time, it's just a couple tips, couple taps, and you're going to see all the amazing deals to get squared away for your college football season. The app is made super simplistic, so you can see the exact view from your seat before buying. You're going to love the deals, the zone deals. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seat, and they save you big money. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way you can physically possibly think of to get tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create that account. Redeem that code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. It's that simple. Get the best in the ticketing industry for you. All right, before we slide on off of here, it's been put out that Markell Samuel is not going to be available for this game. So the guy that was our best lineman coming in to the season likely wasn't available for Oregon, and that caused Nuku Mafi to slide her to the other side, and Nebraska transfer Grant Sigrin to step up and take the right tackle spot. So now you have Nuku Mafi at left tackle right next to Bob Schick. Bob Schick was kind of talked about some of this, and he's giving the vote of confidence for how athletic Nuku Mafi is and how he thought he'd perform fairly well in the Oregon matchup, so on and so forth. Kason Carpenter for this game, it would be not only a cool story because there are going to be multiple Cowboys playing for Tulsa. I believe the only Tulsa Golden Hurricane we have is the center, Kason Carpenter. He's had some health concerns, obviously. Coming into the season, we had to deal with Jalen Beckley and Miguel Chavez, Louis Canepa, Tyler Brumfield. So a lot of the contributors that we could have potentially looked at throughout the year, they came in banged up. And this was an offensive line crew that couldn't really afford to have guys banged up. Now our starting left tackle, the guy who performed the best at UTM, he's banged up. Appears to be a foot injury. Appears to be something that's going to linger for a little bit of time. So now we just move on to the next, I guess. But it does equal more worries. We were talking in the first couple segments about finding an identity and how the identity of this game can not only help you in this game, but it can show forth through Baylor, and that can help in recruiting because you're playing Tulsa, so on and so forth. The OLine concerns, they make it a little bit more problematic. So maybe our identity is going to be a team that does trick plays. I don't know. But this is also an opportunity for any of the backup dudes. I would imagine guys like Jason Queso Brooks and Noah McKinney would have loved some opportunities this previous season. And at one point in time, when you knew how the season was going to go, we probably should have got more of these dudes in here for playing time, but I digress. Haas Haney was capable of covering up the offensive line deficiencies. Zane Flores is mobile enough, but not mobile enough to cover up the deficiency. So my concern is if you have a fully healthy Trent Hallen, and let's say Ceci Valahe is ready to rock and roll, you think that we should be able to pound the rock. But it kind of depends on what the offensive line looks like. Like, where's Austin Kweke going to be? If Kason Carpenter comes back, does Austin Kweke take a slot, or does he automatically fulfill that flex option that he has been up to this point? I don't know. But I think we can all agree that our best offensive lineman not being available after already losing your starting center, it's not a good recipe for success. So we're about to find out, where we are with the coaching staff. I think we all believe in Cooper Bassett and Andrew Mitchell and Grant Garner. But now we're going to have to see it, right? Because now we have a depleted offensive line group that is missing the guy who has been the best at protecting the blind side of the quarterback, which has been Markell Samuel. Markell Samuel is probably the best draftable offensive lineman that we have as well, maybe other than Bob Schick. Bright side, I guess you could say, is if we find a way to establish an identity against Tulsa, while we know we're going to have some guys missing on the offensive line, that does show a little bit of confidence that the Cowboys have the capability to figure this thing out as the season progresses. But we need to keep a close eye on this, because I think if you're looking at future rosters, you would hope that Grant Sigrin and Nuku Mafi are going to be integral parts of the roster moving forward after this season. So even if they have some struggles to some degree against Tulsa, it at least will give us a good indication on what we could potentially possibly get when we get some of these offensive linemen back. So in this search for an identity, it will be interesting, because this will be a moment that the coaching can outweigh the talent, right? It's not about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmys and Joes. We've heard all of that. And we saw by the Oregon game, there is some validity to that statement. But we've also seen, as Oklahoma State fans, we've had teams that had no business competing with Texas, that was beating Texas, because we schematically found ways to put them in bad spots. So we can still do that. And this is kind of a game where I think we find out what staff, position-wise, has the ability to make adjustments and get the most out of these young dudes from a week-to-week basis. Because the offensive linemen were already up in it. They were already up against it coming into the season. Now that you've lost a few key contributors to that O-line, now your back's really up against the wall. But all of those offensive line coaches we just named, they're all alumnus. They're all Cowboys that played for Coach Gundy. So if there's any coaching staff in that locker room that is grabbing a hold of their guys and saying, we need to do more with less now more than ever, it's got to be those dudes. It has to be the offensive line. And again, Tulsa gave up almost 400 yards just rushing last weekend. So our offensive line should be as competent as Navy's, even without Markell Samuel or Kason Carpenter. We need to show something position-wise that is far and away better than Tulsa's. One position. And it would be a big deal if it was offensive linemen. I do think that this O-line group is going to have some ability to kind of test the waters, because Tulsa's front seven has been, I don't want to say anemic, but they have not been very good. So if you're looking for a shining star to follow for this game, it's the fact that we should be able to put up a couple hundred yards rushing on Tulsa. We should. Even with the depleted offensive line group, even with missing maybe a running back or two, even with those, Oklahoma State is still good enough. We're supposed to be big enough and strong enough with the body by glass to be able to manhandle a front seven that's already struggling to compete against equal competition. I'd like to believe that Tulsa is not equal competition to Oklahoma State, but we are about to find out. All righty, y'all. So we're going to have this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Lockdown Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. That's okay, too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast, people out there, you are everything that makes this work. Without you, this would be nothing. So I appreciate what you do. Go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. Later, taters.